The year is 1950. Post-war America is rapidly expanding, with new suburbs, booming industries, and a growing consumer culture. Television is a novel medium, slowly making its way into American homes, initially offering limited programming, often live, and primarily in black and white. Its promise is immense, but its exact trajectory isn't yet set. In our timeline, the commercial model quickly dominated, driven by advertising, leading to the rise of major networks like NBC, CBS, and ABC, and shaping American mass media for decades. But what if a different vision for this powerful new medium had prevailed? What if television's primary purpose was seen not as entertainment and advertising, but as education and public service? Welcome to our episode, where we explore a nation shaped by information, not commercials. What if public broadcasting became dominant in early U.S. television? Our point of divergence takes us to the early 1950s. Imagine this: instead of allowing the proliferation of commercial licenses almost unchecked, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, perhaps influenced by a powerful, visionary politician like Eleanor Roosevelt, or a well-funded, influential public advocacy group such as a vastly expanded Ford Foundation, implements a radical policy. The vast majority of TV licenses are reserved for non-commercial, educational, and public service broadcasting. Advertising on television is either severely restricted, heavily taxed, or outright banned for decades. Funding comes primarily from robust government grants, substantial philanthropic organizations, and widespread direct public subscription, perhaps through a system akin to a television tax or voluntary public memberships that are widely promoted and socially encouraged. The immediate impact would be a vastly different viewing experience for early American households. Forget the rapid-fire succession of sitcoms, thrilling game shows, and catchy jingles for detergents and cars. Early television programming would be dominated by educational content for all ages, offering everything from daily lessons in mathematics and science for school-aged children to evening courses for adults on history, literature, and even practical skills like gardening or home repair. Imagine a nation where families regularly gathered around the glowing screen not for escapism, but for shared learning experiences. In-depth news analysis would be a cornerstone, moving beyond mere headlines to provide comprehensive context, multiple perspectives, and nuanced discussions of domestic and international affairs. Picture primetime segments dedicated to geopolitical complexities, economic policy debates, or the intricacies of community development, all presented by respected journalists and academic experts, free from the pressure of chasing ratings or advertiser dollars. For example, the Global Forum, a nightly hour-long program, might feature live video conferences with experts from London, Paris, and Tokyo discussing international trade agreements, while American Democracy in Action would offer unedited broadcasts of congressional hearings and Supreme Court arguments, followed by expert panel analysis. Cultural programming would flourish. Live theater productions, ballet, classical music concerts, and opera would be regularly broadcast, bringing high culture into homes that might never have accessed it before. Documentaries exploring everything from the wonders of the natural world to the rich tapestry of human history and diverse cultures would fill significant blocks of airtime, fostering a deeper understanding and appreciation of the world. Civic discussions and town halls, often featuring direct participation from citizens, would become common, strengthening the bonds of community and encouraging active engagement in democratic processes. Imagine the American stage, a weekly broadcast featuring performances from regional theaters across the nation, or Symphonies for the Nation, bringing the Boston Pops or New York Philharmonic directly into millions of living rooms. Children's programming, far from being an afterthought, would be a national priority. It would focus heavily on learning and development, akin to what PBS would eventually offer in our timeline, but on a massive scale and with greater resources. Imagine dedicated blocks of programming akin to Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, appearing years earlier and receiving vast budgets, producing content that not only entertained but demonstrably boosted literacy rates, critical thinking skills, and social-emotional intelligence from an early age. Puppetry, animation, and engaging storytelling would all be harnessed for educational ends, shaping a generation with a robust intellectual curiosity. Shows like The Curiosity Corner, where puppets explored scientific principles through hands-on experiments, or global explorers, using animated journeys to teach geography and world cultures, would be household names. The economic landscape surrounding television would be fundamentally altered. The massive advertising industry that grew up around commercial TV would be significantly smaller, or diverted to other media like radio and print, which would retain a more prominent role as advertising vehicles. This could mean a less consumerist culture overall, with less pervasive pressure to constantly buy new products. Without the ubiquitous visual bombardment of idealized lifestyles tied to material goods, Americans might prioritize experiences, education, or community involvement over the accumulation of possessions. This could lead to a different kind of economic growth, perhaps one more focused on services, sustainable practices, or intellectual capital. The entertainment industry would still exist, but without television as its primary mass-market vehicle, Hollywood might continue to focus more on film, emphasizing cinematic experiences and artistic merit. Live performance venues, theaters, music halls, dance companies, might retain greater cultural prominence and financial viability, as they wouldn't be competing with a readily available, free, and endless stream of televised entertainment. Radio might also maintain a stronger foothold as a source of serialized dramas, comedies, and popular music. Technological innovation in television itself might take a different path. Without the relentless commercial drive for ever newer, flashier sets to entice consumers, the focus might shift from rapid obsolescence to durability, quality, and perhaps even features specifically designed for educational or interactive public use, like early forms of teleconferencing or distance learning tools. The development of color television, for instance, might be less about showcasing vibrant commercials and more about enhancing the realism of documentaries or cultural broadcasts. Culturally, America might develop a more informed and engaged citizenry. Without the constant barrage of commercial messaging and the distractions of light entertainment, public discourse could be more focused on substantive issues. The national conversation would be shaped by documentaries and debates rather than sitcoms and sports, at least in the initial decades. Imagine water cooler conversations revolving around a recent groundbreaking documentary on urban planning, or a compelling debate on civil rights, rather than the latest sitcom catchphrase. Children growing up in this era would have a profoundly different foundational media diet, potentially leading to higher literacy rates, a greater appreciation for arts and sciences, and a more critical, analytical approach to information. They might be less susceptible to simplistic narratives or emotional appeals, having been exposed to nuanced arguments and fact-based presentations from a young age. This could foster a generation more adept at problem-solving, more globally aware, and more civically minded. Education, far from being confined to the classroom, would be woven into the very fabric of daily life through the omnipresent medium of television. The shared experience of public broadcasting could also foster a stronger sense of national identity and community. While commercial television often created fragmented audiences with niche programming, a universally accessible public service model could provide common cultural touchstones and shared intellectual experiences, bridging social divides through a collective pursuit of knowledge and understanding. Regional programming, funded by local grants and subscriptions, could celebrate local cultures and issues, further strengthening community bonds. However, this alternate reality isn't without its complexities. The sheer variety and immediate popular appeal of commercial entertainment might be missed by some segments of the population. Would a purely educational format truly capture the attention of a nation craving distraction after a long work week? Could boredom lead to a black market for imported commercial entertainment, or a greater reliance on other, non-televised forms of leisure? Without the direct profit motive, could innovation in television technology or content push the boundaries as quickly? Commercial competition often drives rapid advancement. Would a more stable, publicly funded system be content with slower, more deliberate progress? Would a centrally funded system be susceptible to political influence, even with the best intentions? Would governmental bodies or philanthropic organizations inadvertently stifle artistic freedom or critical commentary to maintain funding or avoid controversy? These are valid concerns that would undoubtedly play out over decades, perhaps leading to ongoing debates about editorial independence and funding mechanisms. Sports, while still popular, might remain more regional and less of a national television spectacle without massive broadcast rights deals. Major leagues might not achieve the same level of ubiquity, relying more on live attendance and local radio broadcasts, thus retaining a more community-centric appeal rather than becoming global entertainment juggernauts. In this alternate, what-if world, the television set in every American home becomes not primarily an entertainment box or a commercial billboard, but a powerful tool for public enlightenment and community building. It's a nation whose collective consciousness is shaped by a vision of public service, where information and culture take precedence over profit, fundamentally altering the fabric of society for generations. The legacy of this decision would be a society perhaps slower to embrace consumer fads, but quicker to embrace intellectual pursuits, a nation where public discourse is richer, and the pursuit of knowledge is a shared national endeavor. The absence of commercial television wouldn't just alter what's on screen, it would subtly reshape the physical spaces where Americans lived and gathered. Without the constant push for consumer goods, how might home design evolve? Perhaps the living room, instead of being centered around a constantly upgraded entertainment console, might re-emphasize the fireplace as a gathering point, or feature more built-in bookshelves, reflecting a culture that prioritizes reading, discussion, and shared intellectual pursuits. Televisions, being less about fleeting entertainment and more about durable educational tools, might be integrated more thoughtfully into furniture, perhaps even becoming a central, yet unobtrusive, part of a learning nook rather than a flashy focal point. Public spaces, too, could evolve differently. Imagine community viewing halls becoming more prevalent, not just for major national events, but for regular local debates, lectures, or even communal learning sessions. These wouldn't be passive viewing experiences, but opportunities for active engagement, followed by local discussions and workshops inspired by the broadcast content. Imagine great books, discussion groups spurred by televised literary analyses, or local conservation efforts galvanized by documentaries on environmental issues. The television, rather than isolating individuals, could become a tool for collective learning and action. The concept of celebrity would also likely shift. Instead of actors and pop stars, the most recognized faces might be those of esteemed historians, groundbreaking scientists, renowned artists, or insightful journalists. These figures would command a different kind of respect, admired for their intellect, their contributions to knowledge, and their ability to articulate complex ideas. Children might look up to astronauts, marine biologists, or classical musicians as their heroes, shaping aspirations towards intellectual and cultural achievement rather than material wealth or fleeting fame. This could subtly alter career paths and educational priorities for generations. Even holiday traditions might subtly adapt. While commercial advertising often dictates themes and gift-giving pressures in our timeline, this alternate reality might see a greater emphasis on shared experiences, cultural performances, or educational gifts that foster learning and creativity. The focus could shift from what one buys to what one learns or creates. The profound absence of a massive television advertising industry would have cascading effects through the economy, touching sectors far beyond just media. Product development and marketing would undergo a fundamental reorientation. Companies wouldn't rely on splashy, emotional TV ads to sell their wares. Instead, they'd need to focus intensely on product utility, durability, and word-of-mouth reputation. Marketing might revert more strongly to print advertisements emphasizing detailed specifications, or direct mail campaigns. The longevity of products might become a key selling point, as planned obsolescence would lose one of its primary drivers. This could lead to a consumer landscape where products are built to last, reducing waste and fostering a more sustainable economy. The retail sector would also transform. Instead of sprawling malls designed to encourage impulse buys driven by televised desires, shopping might become more utilitarian. Local main streets, emphasizing specialized shops and personal service, could remain stronger. There might be less pressure to constantly update wardrobes or electronics, leading to more deliberate purchasing decisions. Discount stores, less reliant on advertising, might focus purely on efficiency and price, while specialty stores would thrive on expertise and quality. The automotive industry, for example, might prioritize engineering excellence, fuel efficiency, even without environmental concerns being top of mind initially, and safety features over annual style changes and aspirational branding. Cars might be seen more as practical conveyances and less as status symbols, influencing design towards function and longevity. Furthermore, the significant capital that, in our timeline, flowed into advertising could be reinvested differently. Corporations might direct more resources into research and development, employee training, or community initiatives. This could foster a more innovative and skilled workforce, and potentially lead to advancements driven by practical needs rather than market creation through advertising. The greatest challenge for a dominant public broadcasting system, over decades, would undoubtedly be maintaining true independence from political influence and ideological pressures, especially given reliance on government and philanthropic funding. Imagine the annual budget debates in Congress. While the ideal would be an arm's-length relationship, political factions might inevitably try to leverage funding to influence content. This would necessitate robust legal frameworks and perhaps an exceptionally strong, independent oversight body, a public broadcasting board with constitutional protections, akin to the judiciary, to shield broadcasters from partisan demands. This board would need to be composed of highly respected individuals from diverse backgrounds, appointed for long, staggered terms to insulate them from short-term political whims. There could be subtle forms of soft censorship. If a documentary series critically examines a policy favored by the ruling party, or a cultural program challenges prevailing social norms, would there be pressure to tone it down, delay its airing, or reduce funding for the department that produced it? The system would need internal ethical codes and whistleblower protections to ensure intellectual freedom and journalistic integrity. This constant tension between public funding and independent expression would be a defining characteristic of this alternate society. Conversely, the lack of commercial pressure could also remove a different kind of censorship, the self-censorship driven by fear of alienating advertisers or broad audiences. This might allow for bolder, more experimental, and more challenging content in the arts and in investigative journalism, pushing societal boundaries and fostering critical thinking in ways commercial media might avoid. In this alternate, what-if world, the television set in every American home becomes not primarily an entertainment box or a commercial billboard, but a powerful tool for public enlightenment and community building. It's a nation whose collective consciousness is shaped by a vision of public service, where information and culture take precedence over profit, fundamentally altering the fabric of society for generations. The legacy of this decision would be a society perhaps slower to embrace consumer fads, but quicker to embrace intellectual pursuits, a nation where public discourse is richer, and the pursuit of knowledge is a shared national endeavor. A generation raised on this diet of public broadcasting would be notably different. The boomers of this timeline, instead of growing up with the idealized suburban families of commercial sitcoms or the competitive spirit of game shows, would be shaped by the intellectual curiosity of the Young Scientists Club and the civic responsibility taught by Democracy for Juniors. They might enter adulthood with a heightened sense of civic duty, a greater appreciation for lifelong learning, and perhaps a more nuanced understanding of complex global issues. Their rebellions, when they inevitably came, might not be against consumerism or shallow entertainment, but perhaps against perceived governmental overreach in public broadcasting's content, or a desire for even more diverse voices and perspectives than the structured public system could provide. The counterculture might manifest as underground art movements that challenge perceived intellectual elitism, or independent media, perhaps via print or early, decentralized forms of communication, that seeks more visceral, direct forms of expression outside the established public channels. The university system would also be profoundly impacted. With television serving as a universal educator, universities might shift their focus even more towards advanced research, specialized postgraduate studies, and fostering deep intellectual communities. The lecture hall experience, already widely accessible via television, might transform into more interactive seminars and hands-on research opportunities. This could lead to an acceleration of scientific and academic progress, as fundamental knowledge is widely disseminated through TV, allowing university resources to be dedicated to pushing the frontiers of discovery. Public broadcasting might also serve as a powerful recruitment tool for higher education, inspiring millions to pursue advanced studies. Consider the fate of specific commercial entities. Companies like Procter & Gamble, General Motors, or Coca-Cola wouldn't vanish, but their market strategies would be radically different. Procter & Gamble might still produce detergents, but their marketing would rely on print ads in newspapers and magazines, word of mouth, and perhaps direct mail, emphasizing product efficacy and value rather than aspirational imagery. General Motors would sell cars based on engineering, durability, and practical features, with less emphasis on annual model changes driven by style. Their branding would be more about reliable transportation and less about personal identity. Coca-Cola would compete on taste and distribution, perhaps sponsoring public events or educational initiatives to build brand loyalty rather than relying on omnipresent TV jingles. The advertising agencies that became Madison Avenue giants in our timeline would remain smaller, more focused on print design and direct marketing. The interaction with other media would also be distinct. Newspapers would retain a much stronger position as a primary source of local and national news, benefiting from the reduced competition for advertising dollars. They might deepen their investigative journalism and analytical content, becoming essential companions to the televised news analyses. Radio, especially local radio, would continue to thrive as a source of music, localized talk shows, and community announcements, serving as a more intimate and immediate medium for entertainment and local information. Film, as mentioned, would likely remain the pinnacle of mass entertainment, attracting top talent and larger budgets, evolving more as an art form and less as a feeder for television. Broadway and live music concerts would experience a golden age, as television provides broad exposure and cultural validation without competing for direct audiences. The long-term psychological impact on individuals in this society is fascinating. Without the constant, subtle pressures of advertising, individuals might experience less anxiety about social status tied to possessions. There could be a greater sense of contentment with what one has, and less emphasis on constant acquisition. This isn't to say ambition would vanish, but it might be channeled more into intellectual pursuits, community building, or personal skill development rather than purely economic advancement. Could this lead to a population with generally lower levels of material dissatisfaction, and perhaps even different metrics for personal success and happiness? Mental health trends might shift. While new stressors would emerge, the specific anxieties tied to consumer culture and idealized lifestyles might be less prevalent. Relationships might be less influenced by material displays and more by shared intellectual interests and communal activities. This deep dive into an alternate American past paints a compelling picture of a nation fundamentally shaped by its primary mass medium. The choices made in the early days of television would echo for generations, creating a society that prioritizes knowledge, civic engagement, and cultural richness over commercial appeal and rampant consumerism. It's a world where the glowing screen truly serves as a window to enlightenment. Now, let's explore the nuances of content creation within such a public system. The absence of a profit motive means producers aren't chasing ratings, but they still need to engage the public. This would lead to a unique kind of creativity. Teams of educators, artists, and journalists would collaborate closely, focusing on pedagogical effectiveness and intellectual depth, rather than simply entertainment value. Programs might undergo rigorous academic review to ensure accuracy and educational merit. This could foster a television landscape where intellectual rigor is celebrated. However, it also raises the question of artistic freedom versus educational mandate. Would experimental art or controversial documentaries struggle to find airtime if they were deemed too abstract or not educational enough by oversight committees? This tension would be a constant, driving internal debates within the public broadcasting institutions. The evolution of regional versus national identity through this media lens is also intriguing. While a national public broadcasting network would foster a shared sense of American identity through common educational and cultural touchstones, the strong emphasis on local and regional stations, funded by local communities, would also strengthen distinct regional identities. A Texan might watch a nationally produced documentary on the Civil War in the evening, but during the day, their local public station might air programs celebrating Texan history, music, and local ecological challenges. This could lead to a nation that is simultaneously unified by a shared pursuit of knowledge and richly diverse in its local cultural expressions, potentially mitigating the homogenization often associated with commercial mass media. It could foster a stronger sense of local pride and community involvement, as local media directly serves local needs. Finally, consider the potential for cultural resistances or counternarratives. Even in a society deeply steeped in public service media, human nature craves diverse experiences. While a black market for commercial entertainment might exist, it's also possible that forms of non-televised, perhaps underground, counterculture would flourish. Think of independent music scenes, satirical zines, or performance art that explicitly challenges the prevailing intellectual and civic tone of public broadcasting. These movements might serve as outlets for pure escapism, raw emotional expression, or a critique of perceived high-mindedness or government influence within the dominant media. This could lead to a society with a fascinating dichotomy, a highly informed, civically engaged mainstream, coexisting with vibrant, perhaps even rebellious, subcultures that find their voice outside the official channels. The very success of public broadcasting might inadvertently create a fertile ground for these alternative expressions. In this even further expanded, what-if world, the television set in every American home truly becomes not primarily an entertainment box or a commercial billboard, but a powerful tool for public enlightenment and community building. It's a nation whose collective consciousness is shaped by a vision of public service, where information and culture take precedence over profit, fundamentally altering the fabric of society for generations. The legacy of this decision would be a society perhaps slower to embrace consumer fads, but quicker to embrace intellectual pursuits, a nation where public discourse is richer, and the pursuit of knowledge is a shared national endeavor. What do you think? Would a dominant public broadcasting system have led to a more informed and engaged American society, or would it have lacked the popular appeal and innovation of its commercial counterpart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this enlightening journey into an alternate American past captivated your imagination, give us a like and subscribe for more what-if scenarios that make you look at our world with fresh eyes.